Hi everyone, my name is Michelle and I will be your group leader this week. To start off our discussion, I would like to talk about how the book compares culture to religion. I think it is very interesting how the book compares culture to religion by saying they both locate a set of common beliefs and values that set a general view of order, the way things are, and an explanation why things are that way. The tie between religion and culture is so important to organizational studies because it indicates how the search for order and explanation creates beliefs. But not all members of a culture accept or practice those beliefs in the same way, and this is where subcultures come to play. Since there are subcultures, it is important to understand an organization's culture as a dialogue with many different voices. Organizational cultures emerge from members' individual and collective symbol using practices. These various symbolic expressions come together to sort of create a unique sense of place that defines an organization's culture. Scholars and practitioners will often focus on one or more of these symbolic expressions, which are also known as cultural elements, to learn more about or even transform an organization's culture. These elements include metaphors, rituals, stories, artifacts, heroes and heroines, performances, and values, and I will go more deeply in depth with all of these in a few seconds. First off, I would like to discuss metaphors. The book defines metaphors as figures of speech that define an unfamiliar experience in terms of another, more familiar one. For example, I work at a restaurant and all of my employees refer to our work as our family. We are obviously not true real life family, but we can metaphorically say we are a work family because of how much time we spend together and how close we are. Secondly, I would like to talk about rituals. The book explains how rituals dramatize a culture's basic values and can range in scope from personal, day-to-day routines, from accomplishing tasks to annual organization-wide celebrations of top performers and also public meetings. Rituals are organizational cultures because they are special to that culture. For example, every year my work has a Christmas party where they hand out awards and we go to dinner, which is what we consider to be our ritual. Next, I would like to discuss heroes and heroines, which are members of an organization who are held up as role models. These members are the ones who embody the cultural values. At my restaurant job, we have lead servers and bartenders that every employee looks up to. These people know the ins and the outs of the restaurant and directly personify the restaurant's cultural values. These leads are the heroes and heroines of my job. Next, I would like to discuss performances and how they are a cultural element of an organizational culture because they center on identity, passion, rituals, and socialization of new members and politics. Members of an organization will often construct cultures by engaging in creative communication. An example of the performance of identity can be seen when a bartender is performing a mock interview by serving the managers drinks to see how well they fit the spot. Next, I would like to elaborate on storytelling and the importance it has in a cultural environment. Storytelling helps convey to the members of a culture their values, consequences for things not being done the right way, and how things should be done, and also the role of leadership in the organization. Now, the book uses the example of the Walt Disney Company, which I believe to be a great example because my sister worked for Disneyland for many years. While she was working there, she shared with me how special the community is there. The employees, or as they would call each other, cast members, all share these stories with each other to maintain the cultural values that Disney holds. Artifacts are the tangible and physical features of an organization which contribute to its culture. The way employees dress, decorate their office, arrange their physical office are all examples of artifacts. At my work, we are all required to wear a shirt from the restaurant and football jerseys on game days and also hockey shirts on game days, which are the artifacts of our cultural element. Finally, values represent either a more or less shared set of beliefs about appropriate organizational behaviors. Many of the leaders or founders of an organization form these values. For example, the owner and managers of the restaurant I work for set the values for the employees that work there to a very high standard, making sure we put the guests first and create a memorable experience for every person that walks in. I would also like to discuss the reading from the module written by John Coleman titled Six Components of a Great Corporate Culture. This article is great because it discusses 6 components that can provide a firm foundation for shaping a new organization's culture. The 6 components that Coleman discusses are vision, values, practices, people, narrative, and place. Coleman explains the importance of a vision or a mission statement. Now, to have a vision within a company gives it purpose, so to have a purpose in an organization will affect every decision employees make. Coleman also then talks about the importance of values and how they are the core of its culture. Yes, it is important to have a vision, but the values are what set guidelines on mindsets needed to achieve that goal. I personally believe values to be so important in every aspect of life, especially when it comes to work life. Coleman goes on to discuss practices. He mentions how an organization cannot have values without practicing them. By that statement, Coleman means that you must have to invest in your values. You can't just want them or assume they will be there without practices. Coleman goes on to say how people are an important component of creating a great corporate culture. A company needs people who also share its core values and stand for those values. I have always thought that we need each other in order to be successful. People can change the world if we share similar values. Coleman then also says that the power of narrative is very important when it comes to a business. Every organization has a unique story, and the narrative is a core element of cultural creation. People love to know the background story of how companies started and the passion behind it, and I know I love hearing these stories as well. Lastly, Coleman discusses how place is very important when it comes to creating a great corporate culture. He mentions how place shapes culture, which I thought to be a very powerful statement. There is a reason why so many cities, such as Los Angeles and New York, have a clutter of people starting businesses, and it is because these places have created that culture. These places impact the values and behaviors of people in that workplace. The last thing I would now like to touch on for this discussion are the competitive pressures in the business climate of the 1970s. I find it very interesting to learn about the history of business because it is important to have the knowledge and realize how we developed into the society that we are today. In the 1970s, there was a significant increase in global competition, with Japan being the main competitor. Japan was known to be able to adapt to their surrounding cultures, which made them so successful. Towards the end of the 20th century, Asia had economic problems that surprised many people because they were so successful. It was proven that a lot of the success that Japan had came from partnerships and clever strategies. Now, towards the mid-1980s, many American organizations were failing. Business leaders then began speaking of organizational change in attitudes, values, and practices. It is crazy to see how differently businesses were run in previous years compared to this day and age. Well, now that I have discussed some of the historical and cultural background, I would like to conclude this week's video discussion. Thank you all so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful week.